Welcome to Mythos Most Wanted, where ancient legends and myths go on trial. Here, we don't just tell old stories, we dig up cold cases buried in sacred texts, forgotten temples, and whispers of eternity. Today, we look at the legendary Black Shuck, a harbinger of justice and a terror of the night. England is a country shaped by memory. From its moss-covered ruins to its meandering hedgerows, this land carries the weight of history like a second skin. Beneath its pastoral charm, its rolling hills, storybook villages, and weathered churches, there lies a pulse, a rhythm, something ancient that has never quite stopped moving. For those willing to listen, it murmurs in the fog, it stirs in the wind. Not all stories in England are over. Some are still being written, in blood. The people of East Anglia know this better than most. Here, in the windswept fens and along the crumbling cliffs, there is a legend whispered between generations, a name muttered with caution. Black Shuck. Towering, spectral, and impossibly old, this is no mere beast. It is judgment incarnate, a creature born of myth and memory, driven by moral gravity. It does not haunt its prey, it sentences them. The horror began on a storm-racked day in 1577, the sky boiling over the Suffolk towns of Bungay and Blythburgh. There was no rain, just fire in the air, thunder without warning, wind without mercy. Inside two churches, packed with frightened worshippers, something unspeakable forced its way into the sanctum. They say it came with the wind, a blur of black fur and burning eyes. It moved like smoke and struck like judgment. Two men died instantly, their necks snapped as though by invisible jaws. The pews were splintered, the air reeked of sulphur, and the stone beneath its paws was scorched black. There were no footprints, only silence, and claw marks still etched into the door of Blythburgh Church, like a warning, branded into time. Reverend Abraham Fleming recorded the aftermath with trembling pen. This black dog, or the devil, in such a likeness, passed between two people, kneeling in prayer, wrung the necks of them both, and so departed, without explanation or salvation, just the hush of the congregation and the stench of burned stone. Centuries passed. People moved on, until the silence was shattered again. On August 4th, 2016, on the same day and location, 3 bodies were discovered. They had not struggled, and there were no clear signs of trauma, and yet their throats were crushed from within. One of them managed to send a single text, just seconds before her death. There's something in the mist. Some crimes linger not in the act, but in the lineage. Professor Lyra Mallory, an expert in mythoforensics at Oxford's elusive Black Archives Division, has spent her career studying hauntings that don't attach to places, but to people. What she found shook even her. Deep in the university's forbidden stacks, she uncovered the Fenwick Ledger, a 12th century manuscript buried by the church for centuries. One line, faded but furious, chilled her. Let the beast walk, for the sin runs deep. Let it find the sons of the Oathbreakers. It shall drag them unto the veil. Using advanced genealogical mapping, Mallory traced the victims of Black Shuck across time. The same names echoed again and again, descendants of Norman conquerors, who, in the wake of 1066, seized sacred Saxon and pagan land through blood, betrayal, and unholy bargains. These were not tales of coincidence. These were executions disguised as folklore. Her conclusion was clear and devastating. Black Shuck is not summoned. He is called by consequence. He does not haunt. He arrives when the curse comes due. And suddenly, the pattern made sense. It wasn't about where you lived. It was about what your ancestors swore and what they broke. To understand Black Shuck, one must step into the dark corridor of generational guilt. Dr. Irene Marlowe, a leading profiler in mythological threats, drafted the first psychological assessment of the entity. What she uncovered defied everything modern science could grasp. She called it Alpha Reaper Class, a designation reserved for beings that do not evolve, do not negotiate, and do not forget. Shuck was not acting randomly. He was methodical, precise, a moral force guided not by vengeance, but by ancient covenant. Black Shuck, she wrote, exhibits a perfect predator's logic. No deviation from mission, no mercy, no hunger. It does not kill for pleasure. It kills because the balance demands it. But what chilled her most wasn't the behavior. It was the implication. To encounter Black Shuck is to face not just your fate, but the sins of those who bore your name before you. It is not justice. It is the legacy of wrong, dragging its claws across time. In 2017, a team of acoustic engineers and occult scientists constructed something called the Howl Room inside the ruins of RAF Woodbridge. Their goal was outrageous: to manipulate sound frequencies so subtly that they could open communication with non-physical entities. They called it Dreamtime Resonance, a theory borrowed from Aboriginal spirituality, suggesting the past was not behind us, but beside us, breathing. What they received defied all expectation. On the third night, something replied. A sound rose through the static, deep, wet, like shifting earth under ancient roots. And then, a voice. Not one born of lungs or throat, but pressure, vibration, and will. It spoke in impressions, not grammar, yet the message was unmistakable. I am the reminder. The air in the room dropped instantly. Frost laced the observation glass. Why do you kill? The interviewer asked. Because oaths are not forgotten. The phrasing was archaic, deliberate, as if memory itself was the weapon, as if the land keeps score, and when asked if it chooses its victims, I do not choose. I find. I follow the stain. Moments later, the feed died. Outside in the woods, every animal, foxes, dogs, birds, howled at once. A mournful, bone-chilling cry that seemed to echo through centuries. The lead researcher, Dr. Eleanor Voss, was found in her chair, paralyzed, her fingernails split and blackened into crude hooks. She never spoke again. The tapes were sealed, the room dismantled. But those who've heard the recordings say, beneath the static, you can still hear it. A slow, deliberate exhale, as if something vast was waiting to breathe again. Human beings have always tried to cage the unknown, but not everything fears the cross or the circle. In 1989, the Church of England dispatched a team of exorcists, battle-hardened men from its secret, arcane division, into Thetford Forest. They carried bells of blessed iron, sacred soil from holy ground, and a 9th century charm etched into oak, meant to bind ancient spirits. They didn't return. 3 were found the next morning, half buried in peat, their bodies twisted, unnaturally, as if frozen, mid-fall. Their eyes were gone, not torn out, but erased. Their sockets were smooth as river stones. Their lungs were filled with salt water. The remaining 4 were never found. The church labeled the mission a Category Omega failure, a total collapse. Black Shuck was declared non-containable, and the official advisory was reduced to 3 warnings. Avoid the places where oaths were once made. Do not trace your bloodline too far. And never, ever, walk alone when the wind smells of lightning and the dogs fall silent. 3 weeks ago, in the Norfolk countryside, a woman phoned emergency services. Her voice was shaking. She said she'd seen something, a shadow the size of a horse with fire for eyes, outside her kitchen window. Her grandfather, she explained, had once owned much of the county. A cruel man, known for burning tenant homes and burying truth beneath brick. Her cottage stood atop an ancient burial mound. Locals had always said the ground there was wrong. When officers arrived, the door stood open. The The kettle was still warm. She was gone. The only sign of disturbance was on the hearthstone. 3 parallel gouges, each one deep and blackened, as if burned into the rock by something far hotter than fire. Black Shuck is not a ghost. Ghosts are echoes, faded, tragic, pitiful. He is not a dog. Dogs are creatures of flesh, capable of loyalty, love, fear. Nor is he a curse. Curses can be broken. Black Shuck is older than belief. He is memory with teeth. The echo of oath and betrayal, etched into the very soil of a nation that tried to forget. But the land remembers. The land does not forgive. And when the ledger calls, Black Shuck comes. So if you ever feel the wind shift, and the birds fall silent, and the air fills with the scent of fur and smoke, do not look behind you. It's already too late. In England, the past is not dead. It paces. It waits. And one night, it may come for you. London is a city built on layers of wealth, ruin, empire, and silence. Its mythologies hide in alleyways and beneath footfall, waiting to awaken. In 2019, a new story began. Not in Parliament or Tower Hamlets, but in a forgotten alley behind a corner shop in Brixton, where despair had made its home. Callum Ward, aged 13, was already used to invisibility. His mother, a once brilliant woman undone by addiction, had died in a shelter. His father's name vanished into a file no one opened. Since then, Callum had been passed from one indifferent foster home to another, surviving on instinct, anger, and silence. At 13, he had mastered the art of absence, keeping his head down, voice quiet, hopes low. On an ordinary grey afternoon, Callum encountered the cruelty of the world incarnate. A group of older boys from the estate, bored and hunting for weakness. They dragged him behind an off-license, where discarded needles clung to the pavement and the walls stank of last night's rain and rot. They laughed, they kicked, they called him nothing, because to them, that's what he was. Callum didn't scream. He never did. He knew the world wouldn't listen. But just before the darkness claimed him, he felt something else, something ancient, a presence, a stillness before a storm. The mist came. It didn't drift. It rose, as though the ground itself exhaled memory. Cold and heavy, thick with the scent of loam and iron, it smothered sound and light. The boys hesitated, confused. Then they began to panic. From the heart of the fog stepped a creature not of this world. A great black hound. But not a dog. Not truly. It was a silhouette woven from fury and time, eyes glowing with ancient judgment. It made no sound. It did not charge. It simply looked, and the boys knew. They knew. They had been seen. When Callum woke in the hospital 2 days later, he found no answers. The nurses didn't speak to him. The police didn't ask questions. The boys who had beaten him were discovered sobbing on a rooftop, unable to speak, their eyes haunted, their minds frayed. Claw marks, deep, impossible gouges, had been carved into the concrete beside them, as though reality itself had been torn. One nurse leaned in to check his vitals. For a single, heartbeat-long moment, she froze. His eyes had changed. They burned, just briefly, with fire behind smoked glass. The most profound shift was his periodic disappearance. Whenever children in care were harmed, the entity within him activated. He would lose consciousness and reawaken in liminal spaces. Abandoned buildings, derelict stations, rooftops, while perpetrators were either missing or discovered in grotesquely symbolic states. These included internal bone trauma and spontaneous confessions of previously undocumented crimes. Callum was not enacting vigilante justice. He was fulfilling judicial function, serving as a vessel for a larger transhistorical force. By age 17, Callum had no legal identity or institutional affiliation. He subsisted in squats, protected runaway youths, and avoided all formal systems. Among the city's marginalized, a myth emerged: the Hound walks the city. This figure was both feared and venerated. The transformation wasn't immediate. It crept in like winter, quiet, unnoticed, until the frost had claimed everything. Callum began dreaming of places he'd never seen. Moorlands lit by cold stars, forgotten temples drowning in ivy, figures cloaked in ash, kneeling before monstrous shapes in fog. He'd wake, gasping, with blood in his nose, and his sheets soaked in sweat. And always, in those dreams, the Hound watched. But they weren't dreams. They were memories. Not his, but passed through him. Then came the knowing. He could feel guilt, taste it, a metallic bitterness that clung to certain people like a second skin. A social worker who smiled too much but always left bruises behind. A teacher who looked too long, stood too close. Callum didn't understand it. He just knew. And with the knowing came the shifts. Mirrors began to lie. Sometimes his reflection didn't follow him. Once, he saw eyes glowing behind his own. His fingernails turned black and thick, splitting at the edges like claws. His shadow stretched longer than it should have, moving against the light. By 16, he no longer questioned the episodes. He would vanish from one place and wake in another. Abandoned train yards, rooftops, crypts beneath churches. And always, someone had been judged. A trafficker found drowned in a dry basement, lungs filled with brine. A corrupt official confessing to crimes no one had accused him of. A foster father screaming at the walls, clawing at unseen fangs in the air. All left behind in states of penance or annihilation. All guilty. Callum wasn't killing. He was sentencing. He stopped going to school. The system lost track of him. He existed in the spaces between systems, between identities. Squats became sanctuaries. Street kids whispered his name. They didn't fear him. They called him protector. The Hound walks the city. And when someone whispered this in fear, it meant they had something to hide. At 20, Callum Ward had vanished from official records entirely. Birth certificates, case files, school rosters, all deleted, sealed, or misplaced. But in encrypted forums frequented by organized crime syndicates, corrupted civil servants, and cults of power. A name had begun to circulate like a curse. Black Shuck. He appeared in CCTV footage only when he wanted to. A shadow crossing the fog in Canary Wharf. A hooded figure standing motionless at a Camden crossroads as traffic froze. Lights flickered. Dogs whimpered. Victims choked on silence and saw fire in the eyes of a man who was not quite a man. He left no bodies, only truths. A serial abuser collapsing on live television, mid-sentence, confessing to decades of harm. A trafficker's safe house abandoned overnight, doors torn from their hinges, claw marks in the walls. 3 slash-like marks, burned, not cut, left behind on stone, steel, flesh. Callum had become the incarnate memory of wrongs left to rot. And yet, for the voiceless, he was salvation. He fed the hungry. He shielded the terrified. He ensured no child was taken without consequence. To the vulnerable, he was a legend. Warm hands, quiet footsteps, a sentinel cloaked in sorrow and storm. But judgment changes the one who delivers it. The more he carried out his duty, the less he dreamed like a man. His dreams were of Saxon oaths broken under moonlight, of Norman blades rusted with betrayal, of tribes exiled and forgotten. He no longer wondered who he was. He remembered who he had been, not just in this life, but in all the lives before. He was not chosen. He was claimed. He belonged to the land, to the oath, to the reckoning. And the final truth settled over him like falling ash. One day, the Hound would return, to reclaim what was his, because even judgment must answer for its weight. Judgment is never deferred. not even for its bearer. Another case closed. But in the world of gods, justice is never final. If you want more divine investigations, brutal truths, and mythological madness, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Mythos Most Wanted. Your voice helps echo justice across the ages. And trust us, there are darker gods still waiting to be exposed. See you in the next case file.